Item number 15, reports of committees and department heads. The first one up is me. I'm going to take just a few minutes of your time, and I'm going to ask the aldermen to pay special attention to what I'm about to discuss, because I think it's going to be on our agenda next meeting, and I think it's an item that's of some importance generally to the future of not only Brentwood, but also a number of our neighboring cities. I don't know if how many of you had a chance to read the article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch regarding the Consolidated Fire Command. It was on September 2nd. I think it was in Tony Messenger's column. Mm-hmm. And, the column was largely, written by Kurt Becker from what I could tell. And Kurt is a firefighter over in Clayton. He's also the representative of the local union. And, Kurt stated a couple things in that article that I believe are not true, first of all. And the first thing that I think is not true is that the effort to do the Consolidated Fire Command is dead. I do not believe that's true. I believe that Rock Hill has dropped out. I believe that Rock Hill dropped out solely for financial reasons, and I believe that based on what I know of their finances and my discussions with Mayor Mann. I think that they very much wanted to be a part of it. And I think Mayor Mann tried to convince his board to stretch the budget and make them a part of it. But I think his board felt that they were committed far enough already and that they weren't ready to take that step. But as far as I can tell, and from my discussions with the mayors of the other cities involved, Richmond Heights has already approved the agreement. Yes. The city of Maplewood is taking it up at their next meeting, which is in about a week. And the city of Clayton will be taking it up very shortly as well. And so, I do not believe that this is a dead issue. I just don't. And I think I think Mr. Becker saying that is a large part his wishful thinking. And I have a great deal of respect for our union, the firefighters local. I think, John Youngblood and the union members do a fantastic job of representing their members. And we've had, he and David Niemeyer and I and others, the members of the union, have had wonderful, very productive discussions about, the firefighting world and how it's changing and so on and so forth. So, I think I say all that to say that I don't have any particular issue with union in general, and certainly not with our firefighters union, who I think has done a wonderful job of representing their members. But I will say this, that I think it's very clear that Mr. Becker would like to see this proposal killed. And I noted in the article a couple of things, and I want to bring them to your attention. Mr. Becker said in that article that he is 100% behind consolidation of the fire departments, right? And in his preferred method for consolidation of the fire departments is a fire district, okay? Now, I don't know how much you all know about how fire districts work, but this is what happens. Fire districts are independent taxing entities, right, that are set up and answerable to a small board that is elected. It's an elected board, but it's elected from the entire district that it represents. And it's usually a small board, usually 3 or 5 people, something like that, okay? And those seats, special taxing entities, are not well understood by the voters, right? So people in this room perhaps all know what a special taxing entity is, and they know that the board of the library trustees that are meeting downstairs are the people that are in charge of the library taxes that you pay every year, right? And they just control how they're spent. If we were to consolidate into a fire district, then there would be a special tax that goes directly to that district, and that tax money would be under the control of 3 to 5 people on a district board. Okay. Now, typically what happens in fire districts is those board seats are occupied by either union representatives or members of the union. Okay. So what happens is that the district then comes under the control of the people. Right. The finances of the district come under the control of the people for whom, right, it's comprised. And to me, that's a very dangerous thing. As our city attorney once told me, it makes no sense to have the foxes guard the chicken coop. And not that I think that anybody is That's not to say that I think that anybody would do anything dishonest or wrong. I don't think that at all. But I think that Mr. Becker and Mr. Youngblood and others who are part of the union, their job is to represent their members as best they can. And I think if they can put themselves in a position to do better by their members, then they're doing their job, right? But I also think that as we, as the tax-paying citizens, right, that are in need of fire services, right, and want them supplied in the most best and efficient manner, maybe that's not the best situation for us, okay? Maybe it makes more sense to have a consolidated fire command or fire group that is under the watchful eye of Bola Akande, who has to answer to this board when she wants to increase the budget for that particular department. She has to come to us and explain why that department needs more money, right? Maybe it makes more sense to have that group under the under the control of the voters, right? Under the people who are elected directly by the voters, rather than by some people who are elected by a special taxing district, right? Who have all the incentive in the world to stay out of the limelight and simply take the tax money and use it to the benefit of however they see fit. Now, you know, Mr. Becker in the article surmised that this plan failed because the people involved wanted it to fail. Well, I surmise that Mr. Becker would prefer to see a fire district created because that would benefit him. Now, I don't know that to be true, but I do know how fire districts work, and I do know if you go and look at the data, which I've done as a result of our recent efforts to bring our salaries into line with market forces, I will tell you that every single district, bar one, is paying higher than Brentwood, and we are the highest paying municipality. So that's not proof of anything, but it does indicate to me that perhaps the best thing for the people of Brentwood and the people of the surrounding communities is not to have a fire district that's controlled, whose tax dollars are controlled by a small group of individuals who may have a relationship with the people whom they're working with on that board. So I think the reason that I get a little bit, well, look, Mr. Becker has one point of view, I have another, and that's fine. But I say this because I think that there's one thing that Mr. Becker and I can agree on and do agree on wholeheartedly. And that is, well, actually, there's probably two things that he and I would agree on. The first, he stated in the article, and I agree with him 100%, there are efficiencies to be derived from consolidating this area of our public safety effort. There's no doubt about it, right? The fire services, right, there are efficiencies to be gained by consolidating our fire services. Everybody sees it, and so I think, you know, the question is, how do you get there, right? The second thing is, and I don't know if Mr. Becker would agree with this or not, but my feeling is that one way or another they will happen. That municipal governments cannot, you know, we cannot stick our head in the sand and say, hey, we're just going to continue to do things the same way until we can't do it anymore. Either by budget forces or by legislative forces or by other, you know, it will happen. Things will change. And my view is that, you know, you're far better to direct the change in a way that makes sense to you and is in the best interest of the voters and the taxpayers than you are to have some people sitting in Jefferson City decide what's the best way to make this happen for us. Because sometimes they don't have the best picture of what goes on right here on the street when we got to talk to the people. They don't have to do that very often, in my opinion. So anyway, so I think it is an important topic. I think it's far from dead at this point, and I would encourage you to do the research, do the homework for next meeting. Come prepared with lots of questions. I encourage you to ask tough questions. I encourage you to ask as many as you like. But I do encourage you to think about two things. One is there are tremendous efficiencies to be gained by coordinating our efforts in this regard. There's no question about it. I don't think that we'll achieve most of those on the first day of operation of any plan, be it a fire district or a consolidated fire command. But I do think over time those efficiencies will become clear. And the second thing I want you to think about is, you know, I believe very strongly that this change will come. in the not-too-distant future. Whether it is led by us or whether it's thrust upon us, we simply will not be able to maintain the status quo for a long, for a reasonably long period of time. It's just gonna happen. So that if you believe, as I do, that that's the case, then what's the best approach? And how can we best represent our taxpayers and our citizens in that effort? I am not wedded to one, believe it or not, I am not wedded to one solution or another, right? I am interested to hear all of your ideas on the topic, and whether you're voting for the Joint Fire Command or against it, that doesn't bother me. What I want to do is I want to hear some discussion on these points, because I think they're far too important for us to ignore going forward. This is not the type of thing that we can just say, well, we don't want to change. That just won't cut it, right? So if we don't go for this, right, that's not going to be the end of the world, but let's talk about what we are going to do, because that's just as important as what we're not going to do. That's my report. Sorry for taking, I was the longest item on the agenda, I apologize, but there you go.